Hi, I'm Lisa Torres, as everybody kind of knows. I've done a couple of these moderating sections a few times, so thank you for re-inviting me. I run Publicis Media's multicultural practice called Cultural Quotient, and I also am the co-founder of the Once and For All Coalition. We made a commitment when, with ANA as being part of it, of not just committing about putting dollars to work, but also about changing the infrastructure and how this marketplace operates. And I think Brianna said it perfectly in the, not chasing the lowest CPM with the highest scale and expecting expecting everyone to sort of abide to that. So with that, I'm gonna bring some friends that I made. Some of them are my clients and some of them are just people I like. And we're gonna have a real deep, honest conversation about how we progress further than what these numbers represent. So I'm gonna bring on Rachel, please come on. She's brand media strategy and activation for Verizon. Sue Sims for Senior Director Experience Planning and Kellogg's. And my bud on AIM.
Bud.
And Edna Kane Williams, EVP Chief Diversity Officer at AARP. So as you can imagine, we prepped for this and we had a call and we have a group chat going and the group chat was on fire. So I think the first thing we should just, call it out, right? We've seen the numbers, we saw the numbers prior to it being presented. We've seen it here, we heard Brianna and GM and the stuff that they're doing. And it is, I think, everyone here will say it's a little disappointing how the slow progress. I think progress is good. Every progress is good, whether it's slow or fast, but I know that the expectation when we all entered into this was that it was gonna be faster. And it didn't really pan out that way. So I think I would like to open up by saying, what are your perceptions with how the progress is going, in particular, what you observe in the industry when you're with your colleagues from other companies, but also within your walls? Yeah. I'm gonna start with Sue.
Yeah. No, thank you. And thanks for even doing this day. I would just say just a quick blurb. I just had 5 quick meetings with some amazing vendors, and just it's so inspiring. And to get 5 meetings done in the matter of an hour and 15 minutes, already have some great conversations going. So thank you again for AIM for creating this forum. I think, to your point, Lisa, I agree. When everyone came out, right, in 2020 and said, I'm going to put X% of my dollars toward, diverse media suppliers, and it didn't pan out. And again, I know some of it, there is, the thought out there about scalability, brand safety, guidelines, but I think there just needs to be following up with that commitment, not just so much as, and I can talk a little bit later even about how we think about it at Kellogg from an investment strategy perspective, but it needs to be a long-term commitment and it needs to start at the point of business goals, not just at the point of tactical spend, right? So I think that is something that needs to be embedded all the way up front into the things that we do as we're building our marketing plans. So I agree it has been slower than expected.
So the other day when we were talking, I think I would have answered slow. And then I just thought about it now, and I think at a big picture level, it's slow. But I actually think that there's a lot of pockets of momentum, and everyone in this room is a catalyst. And if you work at big organizations, you have to have this sort of relentless energy to keep going at it, right? Like, it's still moving slow, but you're the one who's creating that momentum. So I feel very encouraged and very energized by everyone in this room and all the conversations we're having. And I do think that we have to continue to push, right? And so even though the big picture feels slow, that shouldn't be a barrier to us. We should keep going, keep thinking of new ideas and opportunities. So yesterday I had a different answer. Today I'm thinking about it, and I encourage all of my teams and colleagues who are working on this, we have to keep pushing. We can't just accept that we've made a little bit of movement and that's okay. We just have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Yeah.
Edna?
Yeah, I didn't have the benefit of participating from some of the pre-conversations, so I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrench.
Throw it.
Be provocative. I think it's incredibly slow, disappointingly slow, unacceptably slow. I understand the point about tactical spend, but I think it is all about the Benjamins. It's all about how much money companies are willing to invest, and I think 1% is appalling. So I often in speeches talk about how this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So it is long-term in that sense, but in some ways, I think we use long-term as a guise of almost acceptance. That's at some point, we need to have an urgency about the work and about the goals of including more diverse companies in advertising and marketing. And I am so delighted that AIM is doing this. This is a first, and I think is remarkable. And I'm glad that hopefully it's the first of many. But we need lots of this kind of activity happening. And I haven't heard yet, but especially given the environment that we're now in now, I don't think we can pretend that diversity and inclusion is embraced and thought of the same way it was in 2020. That's not the case. These next couple of years are going to be very difficult. So it's going to take fortitude also fortitude, in addition to dollars. I'm going to keep talking about dollars on the part of organizations and companies.
I agree with you on that 100%. Thank you for that. I think that one of the things in the questions that I had put out was, which I would love to get your opinion on, and then the rest of the thing is, I think I struggle with spend being the only barometer for success. And the reason I say that is because I feel, to your point, that's for me a lagging indicator. If you actually do the work, and I also want people to do the work. I think it's easy to just spend the money without the intentionality behind it to actually change the ecosystem. So what do you think about what should be the barometers of success, if not just spend? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, and I'm going to continue to be the provocateur.
No, I love it.
I do think that, and I loved, I think her name was Brianna from GM,
Yes.
that she said we have an 8% goal for African American Black spend, I think. That's what I heard her say for GM. And I think that's a wonderful example. And if we were at 10% trying to get to 12%, I'd say let's not use spend. We're at 1%. After, and somebody said 2020, and I think that's when maybe some organizations got, but really we've been talking about supplier diversity for 20 years. So 1% after 20 years, it is about the money. And I think spend is legitimately a focus and not just a tactic.
Agreed.
I'm going to agree with you guys after
I think
I agree.
It'll be much more agreeable after
I
this.
agree, yeah.
Whatever you say goes after this.
You give the hard answers and ask the hard questions. That's what the panel's for. We said this was going to be an honest dialogue to understand why we're seeing that. Now, granted, you can slice and dice the numbers all you want. If you took out everybody that's not spending, you might see the progress is actually faster for those who are spending. Because the spend, that 1% spend is driven by advertisers who actually have more than 1% in the marketplace, because you have a lot that are not still spending. That's a whole other panel that we can have in terms of like, why are you not spending? But I think that in terms of that being the sole barometer, I think is what we've been talking about in terms of like, we want to make sure that what we build is a fit ecosystem. And in a fit ecosystem, you should have it from inclusion, and all of this should funnel from the top, from the brief, as the way we call it. But anyway, Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, yes, dollars, that is the way to show, and that is the barometer, of change. I think maybe it's like how we track the spend, right? Because we do know not everything is tracked. I mean, that's for all types of media. I also think, too, I just want to make sure we're encouraging new ways and new opportunities to leverage this ecosystem, right? When I think about content creators, contextually relevant spaces, partnerships, right? Those things definitely have an investment that is tied to them that actually creates more of that longer term commitment, but some of that's not tracked, right? So then I guess how do we get better at tracking the spend, but also encouraging and building more of those relationships to find more of those opportunities. 100% still the spend, like that is something everyone needs to do, but is there even a more diverse way of how we can continue to track that as well?
I'm only asking you because
Yeah.
I know it because you're my clients. Can you talk? Can you both talk about what you've done internally at Kellogg's and Verizon? Because I think that is actually a lesson for other advertisers in terms of what you created internally in order to be able to track success, but also how you are driving innovation in how do you count the dollars, but also the metrics behind it.
Yeah.
So in other words, setting people up for success, so that because every success leads to more money.
Yeah.
So we use the spend as a way to keep ourselves accountable, right? So if we are dedicated to this initiative and we're going to create some guardrails around it, this is going to be our internal target and we're going to need to hit this, right? So that gives us sort of a safe space to drive testing and learning. And so what we tried to tackle was, like, if you do the math and every large advertiser did about 2%, can the industry even sustainably deliver on that? And so we looked for ways to partner with media properties to actually drive sustainable growth and figure out ways in which we can create something systemic that not just us as a large advertiser could leverage, that other advertisers can tap into. So for example, we have a partnership with our good partners at Reset Digital, and we looked at programmatic ways to bring more owned and operated smaller media properties so that we, as a large advertiser who tends to do a lot in programmatic, can invest in them, right? So that's one way that we looked at the ecosystem at large and thought of ways to create more sustainable pathways with investment as one of the guardrails that we had to hit. And then to Sue's earlier point, creative partnerships. Could it just be investment in media? No, it could be investment in creative services and other services that the properties are offering. And so we looked at different ways to create partnership and invest in things along three lines. One, increasing Verizon's ability to do more targeted media to diverse segments. Two, looking at economic inclusion and owned and operated and how we can invest more there. And then three, because of our position in the marketplace as a leader, what does that mean? That means paving new ways, taking risk, and actually testing, and doing more of those things. So that is sort of the charter that we have around our work that we're doing, and we're continuing to push and challenge even that.
Yeah.
Sue, can you talk a little bit about the framework that you've employed at?
Yeah, so, and again, we have a couple different frameworks when I talk about how we even identify what the spend is or what is the opportunity. We definitely have that very much upstream. We actually call it our PETA analysis, which we're looking at, population, who is buying us, how fast are they growing, what's the incidence, so how often do they buy us, where are they buying us, and then over that time. And we actually create what is that % opportunity for each of our brands and how are we going to go after that audience. And then once we determine that, we then say, okay, we have these 3 guiding principles to ensure that we are always going to make sure that we're spending against diverse suppliers. So our first one is, as we all know, in this time period, there's always budget cuts that come through. We are looking at all our spend from an equitable standpoint, right? We are not just automatically cutting off the top or cutting off what's most expensive. How do we look at it from an equitable standpoint? And also providing that we want to make sure we have a certain percentage of gross year after year, and we do have those goals internally. The second kind of guiding principle when we look at to say how we're going to spend against these audiences is we look at all our media partners across an evaluation kind of that you were talking about, Lisa. And on this framework, yes, we have the standard scalability, CPM, but content, is it contextually relevant? ED&I is actually a pillar on that framework across all our media partners, and we evaluate them against that. Who are they reaching? So it's very much, again, trying to look at everybody from an equitable standpoint. And then the third piece is really expanding, like we talked about earlier, expanding about how we think about these places and spaces in a new way, from partnerships, content creation, asset creation, and really trying to maximize. So
Awesome. And I have a question for you because when we're talking about growth segments, 9 times out of 10, everyone's talking about youth, the young game, right? 18 to 34, under 16, and you're looking at AARP is the other side of youth, the one I sit in, where I think I'm 18 to 34, but that's not really true.
aren't we all?
Whatever your mind tells you you are.
Listen, so I wanted you to talk about how you're building those strategies for a community that is really a growth segment in our space that kind of doesn't really get talked about, especially when you think about inclusivity.
Yeah. And we, as the Chief Diversity Officer for AARP, I talk about age almost as much as I talk about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, et cetera, because it is really important, especially in marketing and advertising. The images we see how we talk about the aging process. Now it's very, we have what we call at AARP an initiative called the Longevity Economy, and it basically talks about how being 90 is no longer exceptional. Our CEO often talks about the person who's going to live to be just normally 110 years old is already alive today. That there are 10-year-olds who will naturally live that long. And so aging and the whole concept of aging has really changed, but the marketplace hasn't caught up with it. You've seen some changes in the last decade because of economic forces. A lot of older people have more money than younger people, and that's I have 3 millennials, I hear about it all the time. There are lots of forces at play economically that are impacting younger people differently than they historically did. So we're also careful not to create any generational tension. While we're an organization for people over the age of 50 and their families, really anybody can join AARP. That's a secret that nobody talks about. We're not going to reject anybody. But to your point, being a disruptor around age and fighting ageism has been a real focus of our office. And we have to walk the walk and talk the talk. So the agencies, while have a real focus on the typical race, ethnicity, we have an African American agency, a Hispanic Latino agency, an Asian American Pacific Islander, LGBTQ. We're looking for a disability organization to work with us. And multiple agencies within that, all of them have to bring to bear an understanding of how age impacts our work and demonstrate that they understand that. So you're right, it's something that's really overlooked in the media space and in the marketing space and in the creative space, right, often.
So with that, I wanted to ask you all, and I'll start with you, Edna, because I like that you disrupt the whole room. I love it. So you and I are going to be fast friends, like for sure, because we're cut from the same cloth, clearly. So let me ask you this: what is keeping you up at night? What's the barrier to get this from 0 to 60?
I wish I had a clear-cut answer to that. The whole space of DE&I keeps me up at night, and I alluded to that, and I'm not going to get into politics and messiness, but the country certainly is more polarized, I think most people will agree, than it ever has, and DEI is wrapped up in that. So moving these kind of efforts forward, and I just read an article on Twitter where it said that a lot of the promises that were made immediately post the murder of George Floyd by companies have not come to fruition, and it's not been a decade, it's been just a few years. If the resolve is that fragile, that's what keeps me up, because the next couple of years are going to present challenges that we've never seen before in this space. And if we don't really have the fortitude to say this is the right way to go and push through the negativity, we could be set back. We really could.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Rachel, what keeps you up at night, but also how do you keep the train on the track? Because that's a great point of like, it's
Keep it
only
going.
been 3 years
Yeah.
from where people made the commitment. Some of us have been doing this for a while, even though
Yeah.
we're 21.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot as making it part of the everyday, not like as a checklist item, but like it's a mindset change. And how do you continuously make sure it's included and not an afterthought?
Yeah.
And so we've worked really hard internally to make sure it's at the forefront. I mean, I'm happy to say at Verizon, I feel like a lot of individuals have really latched on to that mission and that vision and have partnered on it, that now it becomes almost second nature that we're talking about it and not sort of preparing for it after the fact, I mean, it's still, but your point about fortitude, I feel like those champions and those catalysts still have to push up a really big hill to continue to reinforce that. And so I think we have responsibility not to lose the momentum that we've created and to kind of just re-energize it in bursts, because I could easily see it falling on the wayside as well. For me, I think about, more ways for us to invest but what would that be? How do we start creating infrastructure? How do we start like really paving the way for opportunity to happen? A lot of what we've been doing the past couple of years is about FaceTime and dialogue, listening for the opportunities. A lot of times the opportunities have to sync with timing, and we have a lot of priorities, and a lot of people look at us as a big advertiser with a lot of spend, but we have a lot of priorities that we have to really try to allocate all the spend to. But I think continuous dialogue really helps. Listening to ways in which we feel challenged, but then thinking outside the box about how Verizon can help outside of just giving money, right? If measurement is a challenge, is there something we can partner on to create a case study where we have proved efficacy, we have proved efficiency, we have proved things the way that we need to look at it from a KPI perspective, but can we partner on that together? And can we invest in that partnership so that we do have more proof, right, that this is effective? And so I think about all the ways in, and that keeps me up at night in terms of thinking about all the ways we can do it, but then picking lanes and then actually doing something, right? Like stopping the talking and moving into action. And so I think that's been some of the hardest parts for us is there's so much opportunity, but you can't boil the ocean. So really picking those definitive test and learns, and then having partner commitment and partner accountability to deliver on that.
Yeah. Love that. I love that. Yeah.
We'll keep what
Yeah,
I
think, yeah. I just share with you all my problems. So, I think like part of it, I would say yes, totally. I'm still in their line. I don't know how we get any sleep at night with everything going on. But I think, one of the things that I consistently see is just that continued education, keeping this top of mind, right? In all our organizations, there's constant turnover and growth and talent shifts, right? At our agency partners, there's shifts. We need to, in order to stay on the track, we need to keep that education and keep top of mind. We have and I think Chelsea's in this room here, we have a Mighty Culture Inclusion team that is constantly embedded with our brands and making sure that this is top of mind. We have done trainings. Well, again, we've done it, over a year ago, our Culture Inclusion Accelerator, that we need to bring that back up, right? Because again, we need to keep this top of mind. We also have a monthly ED&I steering committee, which is not only led through our culture inclusion team, but we have our brands that sit on there, our ERGs, our agency partners, HR, our shopper omni team. Like we have this cross-functional team because again, it is not a mighty, it is too hard to push water uphill with like only a couple people, right? It's gotta be everyone's responsibility. And so keep that top of mind, keeping that education, bringing that new data, research to these teams like an ED&I Steerco is very important, so.
Great. I think that what I would want to ask each of you is, look, we're in a room. You have A&A here. You have your agency partners. You have media vendors. You have research companies. What do you need? What would be helpful? What can someone give you in the next 90 days that would help you push that rock further up the hill?
Yeah.
I'm going to Sue, I'm
Okay.
going to put you back on the spot.
All right, I'm coming back on. I mean, I think just one, and I think it was even shared, I know Bobby would share with it, just driving that visibility, right? What we don't know. So I enjoyed just meeting those 5 partners just even from this morning. I now understand what is their scale, what's their differentiator between other people in the marketplace, So just that visibility, I think, is definitely helpful, but it's also the visibility that we can give to the community, right? So then I was able to share, well, here's what Kellogg has challenges with. Here's what we think you guys can potentially help solve. So visibility for sure. I mean, obviously understanding the scalability and, just what is next on the roadmap too. So just seeing like how is this, how are these opportunities continuing trying to evolve and innovate, and where can, as advertisers, as brands, help support that? So.
And now how could someone help you in the
I
next
thought you
90
were
days?
gonna
No, I'm bouncing. I'm bouncing.
Shifting it up.
I just, again, want to applaud AIM and ANA for this kind of session. I think it's really important. I get a lot of cold calls from agencies, which I frankly try to take, although I prioritize those that are referred by somebody I know, because you just sort of can't talk on the phone all day long, despite what we try to do. But this kind of convening, bringing a lot of people together at once, and I apologize, I'm going to have to leave, but I have colleagues, Yvette Pena's here and has been so active in this venue. But just doing more of this and showing leadership in this space, because again, we're going to need it from organizations like AIM. If I can say in any number of venues that AIM or ANA is doing this or requesting this or leading this, I think that helps all of the different constituencies, the Black groups, the Hispanic groups, these overarching efforts I think are really important.
Awesome. Rita.
I think what I would ask is for a real understanding of our business in terms of, I'm not talking just about KPIs, but in terms of like what the business needs. And, being Verizon, a lot of stuff is applicable and a lot of things are a fit, but, I don't know that we have an awareness challenge. We have a consideration challenge in a lot of cases. And to really understand and unpack that and what that means and how that translates to advertising and partnerships and media, and finding those the intersectionality of that opportunity. We actually have a wide variety of audiences that we speak to, and I think that a lot of individuals come and say, oh, you're a telco and this is where we can operate, but we actually have a lot of depth and complexity to the company, and so really understanding the business, and I think there's joint accountability, like our teams have to do a really good job of explaining that as well, but connecting on what drives our business's growth and what we're looking for beyond like the KPIs of efficiency and CPMs and all of that sort of stuff, but really looking at what truly drives business growth. I think that's where the opportunity to connect is when we're partnering on the mutual ambition, right, to help drive our brand's business and growth.
Awesome. So I see some of the questions have popped up, and interestingly enough, the first one is the one that I wanted to end with. So thank you, whoever had that question, was what has been the most effective way or thing that you've done to turn around the resistance of investment, or the way I was saying that, what's the positive side of this? Because I think we all are, talking about the barriers and the challenges and stuff, but what has actually been successful that you see from an investment standpoint and a partnership standpoint? I'm going to start with Rachel. I'll let you keep going.
One of the things that we've done is to say that it's the same KPIs, but not the same numbers that we have to deliver. And creating our new benchmarks and continuing to test and learn those benchmarks and having tolerance and patience to allow that to happen. I think it's very easy, especially in this world of digital media, to say, oh, that's not delivering out, And so what we've done is really create this like patience in working with the partners and give time for us to learn and to know, but also being very direct to the partners about where we need them to make up for some loss and work with them and sort of do an education about what it takes to sort of be part of our partner list, because we have these goals that we're trying to hit. So that level of transparency, that level of direct conversations is something that we've done that I think has been pretty effective. I don't know if you guys can tell me later if that's true or not, but on holding the teams accountable to delivering that way, because I think it's very easy to look, especially now in the digital world, to say one quarter, no performance, and we're going to move on, but really sticking with it to figure out how we can truly find the opportunity. And maybe it didn't work on this particular campaign, but there's other campaigns and other ways in. But so having that patience and that partnership, again, with the accountability to deliver for the business.
How about you, Sue?
Yeah, I would just, again, I see kind of like two clear paths that we have detailed. One, definitely the measurement piece. So we're trying to identify a long-time G partner. Market mix modeling is definitely what our Bible that we go with, what ROI. And we have partners that aren't, measured, but we have to measure them in a different way, right? So we're actually trying to identify with our insights and analytics team internally is what are those leading indicators that we know these things happen, right? Where I see an increase in engagement, we see an increase in creative effectiveness, as in SIM. These things actually lend itself to sales that we know is going to end up in a positive ROI. So we're trying to flip the model a little bit with being more, evolving the way that we measure. I think the second thing is also when we think about that kind of growth opportunity or overall audience, we're trying to think about it through the lens of an audience strategy in a full funnel model, right? We know that there's some audiences out there that may not be aware of us. There's some that are aware of us. We're trying to drive consideration, and then there's others that we're trying to, right? So
maybe it's not, maybe certain audiences are at different points of the funnel. We need to talk to them differently. We need to find those channels that speak to them to, again, work them through the funnel to get them to convert. So it isn't just like, here's one big ball of spend and try to go do, but how can we be a little bit more precise in finding those audiences, channels, and messaging to really drive that purchase?
Yeah, it's so interesting because we talk full funnel at AARP all day long, as Yvette can attest to, and our purchase is membership.
Yeah.
And I think, my wish is that it seems like we're dealing with a dated paradigm, a dated model. You guys both have alluded to it. We need different ways of thinking about these audiences. Bob alluded to the fact that, or you see even in TV, that a lot of people get that that multicultural audiences in many ways are driving media, creativity, marketing these days. But the models, the measurement, the paradigms that we're using are still from 40 or 50 years ago. And I think it's just time for more than a refresh, but really a serious rethinking of how we measure ROI, how we plot timelines and the like. And that won't happen overnight. But again, I'm the impatient type. I don't want years. I want
90
months.
days.
Yeah, 90 days. 90 days.
Okay, so I think one of the questions here, I'm going to say it because I think everyone is sort of thinking about like crystal ball, Sue.
Crystal ball.
What do you foresee any shifts because we seem to be going into a recession?
Oh, yeah, into recession. I hope people are still packing their pantries. Kellogg. No, but
pack the
again,
pantry.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
pantry.
Pack the pantry.
Yeah, pack the pantry for Kellogg. Yep.
Do the prep work.
But start doing it now. But no, I mean, I think, yeah, if I had a crystal ball, I do hope, I guess maybe it's more so a hope, is, we know when recession comes, spending comes down, right? There's just that overall impact. But I truly hope that it's not always seen as like the first thing to go is what's, at a higher CPM, or what is not, that's the easiest to say cut off the top. Think about the spend from an equitable standpoint, as well as its recession. Where do we think like the growth is going to continue to happen after the recession, right? We have to be very proactive once the recession kind of goes through. We know those, hopefully, our loyalists, our consumer base is still going to be there for us, and we need to continue to kind of hit the gas pedal, right? So, yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, we're certainly not immune to it, right? Even as a really large advertiser. So we do our best to protect it. We've done really well over the past couple of years to preserve our commitment and over-deliver where we could, and we're going to continue to try to do that. But again, we're not immune to it. So I think based on what Sue was saying about like opportunity, right? Finding that real opportunity and continuing to reinforce the fact that there's business growth to be had within the diverse segments, and continuing to be able to prove that with case studies and test and learns is the only way to be the best way to preserve the dollars.
And that's what you say.
And I think we've already proven that these audiences lead. I've only been here a couple hours and I've heard it several times. So if that's the case, recessions are all about prioritization. And I would think that these audiences should fare well because they should be a priority because they're leading. That won't happen, and that's a whole nother panel.
Right.
But just because there's a recession should not automatically mean that there's less money spent for these audiences.
Agreed. I love what you all have said, especially since, you always hear about like there's opportunity in a crisis, like never waste a crisis, never waste a recession. There's always innovation that comes out of it if you really think about it. If you really examine the back end of one, it's, like you develop products to sort of address that. And most of those products sometimes are led by different insights or cultural nuances that allow you to grow. So I think that's all great. I think we have about 3 minutes, so I think parting words, you have your colleagues sitting here, some who are learning and some who are, in the trenches, doing this work day in and day out, and you've called them out. So I appreciate that because those are some of my people that I deal with every day. But what's your advice for someone who hasn't or is sort of like dipping the toe in the water type and is here to learn from
Yeah.
everybody. GM, you, like, you all are doing great work in this space. So, words of advice, parting words. And
Stand in the gap.
great.
We really need voices. The next couple of years are going to be tough. There's already been a withdrawal of sort within corporate America, and it needs to stop. And you can help that. You can be champions, allies, not in a rote kind of way. It's really easy for these words to roll off your tongue and
Yeah.
to go home at the end of the day feeling good. But if you aren't actively working in the trenches to do this work, I know it's very stressful. It's exhausting, but we're not going to get by with platitudes and folks just talking. We've really got to start doing, and I hope that this wonderful convening, at least some fraction of you guys will leave really energized to do the work.
Fortitude, right?
Fortitude.
Love it,
Love
fortitude,
it.
yeah.
I'm gonna change my word for
Yeah.
2023
I know,
to be fortitude.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Yeah.
relentless persistence, like
Yeah.
so much gets lost in the day of, I mean, no one works 9 to 5, but it's just like you can't respond to as many emails and talk to as many people, but I think relentless persistence of getting that connection and that opportunity, and a lot of times it's just timing,
Yeah.
and like you said, education and awareness, so, and then, again, pushing the opportunities through to all the channels that you possibly can, and sometimes, like, I'll discover something that's probably been presented a few times, but it wasn't right when it was presented,
Yeah.
but it was right now, and so I do believe that the relentless persistence can manifest in something really positive.
Yeah, yeah. And I would just, if they were going with words here, maybe we have our T-shirts made. But I would just say a catalyst, right? And I think someone had mentioned that earlier. Like, let this be the catalyst to go out there and try it and dip your toe in the water and invest and find those right opportunities. Again, being transparent with what your business challenges are to this ecosystem. You're going to find those right spaces and places to spend. I think the other thing too is just leveraging. I mean, the amount of brain power in this room is absolutely phenomenal, and what everyone is doing and testing and learning. How can we be, sharing across, this kind of organization as well as like, hey, here's some things I tried. This didn't work, but this worked great. How do we continue to use kind of the power of this room to share those learnings?
Awesome. So I want to thank you both as clients of ours and your team, because you make my life easy. You always pick up the phone if I call, and your teams are doing incredible work. So thank you for shouting them out, because this is not easy, and you are now my new friend. And by the way, Yvette is I love her. Like, that is my pana over there. So so thank you for, that is salt of the earth right there.
She's
So
awesome.
she is amazing. And thank you, ANA, because I think you said it best, of like getting this room together. I know was no easy feat. I know, because I was on a lot of the calls and we did the sponsorship. But the 500 meetings, I think, I hope we never underestimate what's gonna come out of this, and that this continues to be an every year thing. So I appreciate you very much for all the work that you're doing, especially you, Bob, because I know
thank you.
you're pushing it. So that's it for us.
Thank you.